The next chapter in the Monsterverse, Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, comes out in March. To celebrate, we're going through every film in the Monsterverse. In today's episode, it's the return of the king in the sequel to 2014's Godzilla. And this time, he's brought some friends with him. It's Godzilla, King of the Monsters, not to be confused with the American re-release of the 1954 film, here on the Atomic Lizards podcast.
Hello and welcome to Atomic Lizards. We're a trio of friends podcasting about Godzilla and other films we love. I am Miranda, the film fanatic.
I'm Udi, the defective film expert.
And I'm Dan, the Kaiju extraordinaire.
And on today's episode of Kaiju Korner, we are covering Godzilla, King of the Monsters 2019.
This film follows the efforts of the organization known as Monarch as they endure a global onslaught of giant titans, including the likes of Godzilla, Mothra, Rodan, and King Ghidorah. When these ancient beings rise again, their fight for supremacy leaves humanity's existence hanging in the balance.
Godzilla, King of the Monsters is a 2019 American film directed and co-written by Michael Dougherty, and it was produced by Legendary Pictures and distributed by Warner Brothers. The film is a sequel to the 2014 Godzilla. It's the third film in the Monsterverse, and it is the 35th film in the overall Godzilla franchise. It stars Kyle Chandler, Vera Farmiga, Millie Bobby Brown, Bradley Whitford, Sally Hawkins, Charles Dance, Thomas Middleditch, Aisha Hinz, O'Shea Jackson Jr., David Strathairn, Ken Watanabe, and Zhang Ziyi. I hope I pronounced her name right. I'm sorry if I butchered it.
This episode will have spoilers, so go watch it if you haven't. Now let's get started. What are your initial thoughts on this movie? Udi, do you want to go first?
I've had a weird history with this movie, which I feel like I say that a lot for a lot of different movies, but basically I wanted to see it in theaters when it released, but I decided to, I think I talked about this before on the podcast, I decided to quit my job before getting another job, so then I was broke, and then I couldn't go see a few movies in theaters that I wanted to, because that was a dumb decision. But this is one of the casualties that I missed from like seeing in theaters because I was broke and I had no job. And then I finally got to see it I don't know, 6 months to a year later with Dan. And we ended up talking through like all of it. And so I couldn't understand like what was being said most of the time. So the plot already is kind of hard enough to it's not difficult to understand, but it's just very like convoluted, and there's just like a lot of like you're just going from place to place to place to place to place, and there's just like a ton of stuff going on. So I had no idea what the heck was going on really, but I was like, well, the monsters look cool and it sounds cool, so it's got that going for it. And then it wasn't until this year when I finally rewatched it / like fully watched it for the first time, and I really liked it. I think it's a really interesting follow-up to Godzilla 2014. I think they definitely took all the reception that they got for Godzilla 2014 to heart. And I feel like, yes, like there are still some aspects that they didn't alter perhaps enough depending on who you ask. Like they still had a lot of monster sequences kind of in the dark or like in shrouded areas, but I think overall, like I think this movie did a great job of introducing a lot of color. It might still look a little monotone at times, I guess, but I think they add a good amount of color throughout. Every single monster has a very unique identity, and you can definitely tell who's who on screen. And I think they do a good job of paying homage and yet still doing new fun things. It's not a perfect movie by any means, but yeah, I really like it. I think it's my favorite of the MonsterVerse, to be honest, which I didn't expect when I rewatched it. I also thought going into this rewatch that like this overall MonsterVerse rewatch, I should say, that I was gonna like Godzilla 2014 the most, like I had been before. So yeah, this whole rewatch has been a little unexpected because I realized that I didn't like 2014 as much, at least now with all these kaiju movies that I watched in like the last year or so. And then I didn't expect that I liked this one that much. I didn't dislike it again. I wasn't sure how much I would like it. So yeah, it was a pleasant surprise to rewatch it and enjoy it as much as I did.
And I'm kind of surprised that you enjoyed it this much.
Going into like this rewatch, I think I just accepted that like, look, these are just kaiju movies. Outside of like a few occasional ones, mainly from like Toho or whatever, like they're never gonna be like super serious. They're always gonna be like ridiculous, over the top, silly, bombastic, just crazy, and like have horrible, dumb human plots with probably not a great cast of characters, or at least not like super interesting. But you know, as long as they nail like the monster aspect, like boom, great. So I think the MonsterVerse, at least, actually no, I would say this. I feel like every MonsterVerse movie has gotten better with each release in terms of how the kaiju are represented and like the action sequences, and yeah, I think I could agree with that. So yeah, so
I just want to say that what you just said about how what your like mental how you like mentally prepare yourself before going into these movies, that is 100% the correct way to go into these movies, because yeah, that's what they're all about. And then when we get the few very good exceptions like Godzilla minus one, it's a really nice surprise.
yes, for sure, for sure. Like I don't go in expecting that, but when it happens, like that was really nice.
Yeah,
Just to have like
exactly.
an actual decent movie. But yeah, without further ado, I'll pass it to you, Dan. What did you think of the movie?
All right. Once again, I'm not going to go on too big of a tangent. I'm not going to really go on a tangent. I just want to go on like a little bit of backstory that I have with this movie, like I did with Godzilla 2014. And once again, this was another movie that I was just super, super hyped for, because this is the first time we've gotten a Hollywood Godzilla movie that actually uses established Godzilla monsters. Like, we've never had that before. I mean, the past two previous attempts at American made Godzilla movies, Godzilla 1998 and Godzilla 2014, have really just used Godzilla. Now, granted, Godzilla 2014 had the Muto, but those weren't already established Toho monsters. Those were completely original creations by Legendary. Like, Godzilla King of the Monsters is using Mothra, King Ghidorah, Rodan. Like, that's awesome. Like, that's like so cool. Never would have expected something like that. So I was really, really excited for this movie. Perhaps a little too excited. I was so excited that I was always, once again, the same thing with Godzilla 2014. I was always like going on the internet, like trying to find as much info on this movie as I can. And I was subscribed to a Godzilla YouTube channel at the time. And he did this video on these quote unquote leaks for the movie script that came out. And this dude was convinced that these leaks were fake. So he like read through the entire leak, and I watched the entire video. But little did we know that 99% of the information in those leaks was actually correct. So I technically spoiled this movie for myself before I even saw it. And it unfortunately kind of affected my first viewing, because I already kind of knew what was going to happen because I inadvertently spoiled myself. So yeah, too much hype can be kind of a bad thing, because yeah, that's what happened to me. But it's interesting though, because there were some details in the leak that didn't end up making the final cut, and it's like, dang, I wonder what they had planned, like what was originally going to be in the movie. But yeah, that's kind of funny. And then another thing, once again, I gotta bring up the trailers for this movie, because the trailers to Godzilla King of the Monsters, like, we all thought the trailers to Godzilla 2014 were cool, but the trailers to King of the Monsters were something else, man. They were otherworldly. Like, the very first trailer is amazing, and it has this beautiful, like, rendition of Claire de Lune, very famous like piano piece, and then like they edit it to where it bursts into like just a choir, and like the choir hits during this shot where like Mothra is like spreading her wings behind a waterfall, and it was beautiful. Like, oh my god, these trailers were amazing. And unfortunately, like, everybody loves to bring these trailers up as here's an example of a situation where the trailers were way better than the movie. And They might have a point. I haven't really gotten to my thoughts yet, but yeah. So, okay, let me get into my thoughts then. So, what did I think of Godzilla King of the Monsters? I personally believe that this is the best American-made Godzilla movie. Now, that's not saying much because other than the MonsterVerse films, the only other American-made Godzilla movie we had was Godzilla in 1998. But this movie felt more faithful as a Godzilla movie to me than any other like American made Godzilla movie. And it helps that the director, Michael Dougherty himself, is kind of a big Godzilla fan, but he kind of took a risk with this movie because I've said this before in our Monarch episode, and I think in our Kong episode, I don't remember. But once again, this really is just a modern day like Showa era film because like there's certain moments in this movie that I feel are just ripped right out of the Showa era. Like there's a moment where Godzilla shoots his atomic breath at King Ghidorah and like Ghidorah shoots him back with his breath power, and like as Godzilla is falling over, he's still shooting his atomic breath. Like that is 100% something we would see in the Showa era. And whether you feel that helps or kind of damages the movie in a way is really up to you. But me personally, like as somebody who grew up with these movies, I loved what I saw on screen. The monster stuff was awesome. Like honestly, that's the only reason to go and watch this movie is for the monster action. They did such a great job with the monsters, and like Udi said, the coloring was a very important aspect. Each monster has like their own distinct color. With you got the deep blues with Godzilla, the reds with Rodan, kind of the light silvery coloring with Mothra, and like the yellowish coloring with King Ghidorah. And the designs all looked great. That's one thing I was worried about was, oh man, how are they going to screw up the designs for these classic Toho monsters? And I personally felt they didn't. I think all these designs look great. Ghidorah looks great. Rodan looks great. Mothra, I love Mothra's design. She looks awesome in this movie. I just wish she was in the movie for longer than we get. But I mean, well, what can you do? And the human stuff is terrible. I mean, there's nothing we can do about that. But like, that's kind of per the norm when it comes to Godzilla movies, with the few rare exceptions. The human stuff is always going to be terrible, and like, well, I shouldn't say it's always going to be terrible, but the human stuff is usually always terrible. And like, if we're going to have terrible humans side stories, then I would hope that they at least make up with it with the monster action, and they really do with this movie. I do think that this is my favorite film in the MonsterVerse. Like, like I said, I have to rewatch Godzilla vs Kong, but I would say, yeah, this is probably my favorite film from the MonsterVerse. If I were to have to choose a movie to watch from the MonsterVerse, it would probably be this movie. All right, Miranda, what about you? What did you think of Godzilla King of the Monsters?
Yeah, so my thoughts on Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019, not to be confused with Godzilla King of the Monsters 1956, are the following. As usual, I'm going to read off my letterbox review from my original viewing back in 2022. Basically, I said the controlling the monsters with the frequency device is pretty interesting. I liked the fact that they're there to save Godzilla. I still hate the stupid CGI zooms. And then I said, giant blue fire breathing water lizard versus 3-head yellow fire breathing space dragon. Let's go, with an exclamation point. So clearly I liked the fight there. But out of my MonsterVerse rewatch that we've been doing, this one is actually entertaining and actually interesting compared to Monarch, Kong Skull Island, and Godzilla 2014. I've recently been really cold on the MonsterVerse, and that's mainly because if your first two movies and your new television show are super lackluster, it's really hard to care about this whole franchise or get invested into it. So this one actually had something interesting going on. Like, it had an interesting story. The scientists are still kind of there. They don't really know what's going on. It's a little more like out there. I like that the fact that they included some of the original Toho like kaiju, and of course Mothra's there, and she's my favorite and the best kaiju of all time. So I loved that she was in it. I just wish she was fluffier and in the movie more. Um, but in general, if you got like a Saturday afternoon and you need to fold laundry, this would be like the perfect movie to watch because it's not too complicated, lots of monster fights. So overall, not bad. So those are my thoughts. So let's switch over to our discussion points. Let's first talk about the characters in this movie and if anyone standed out in any way. Um, I would like to say that I figured out why I thought Tim was in one of these movies. It's because of the ATT commercial guy. I think his character's name is Sam. He like looks exactly like almost the same type of person that Tim is in the Monarch show. So there was my confusion there. So to clarify, the guy named Sam in the movie, his real name is Thomas Middleditch. His character reminded me of Tim from the Monarch show. So Sam is the reason I thought Tim was in a MonsterVerse movie.
I can totally understand that because both characters kind of share similar traits. So
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense.
It could have been interesting if they decided to keep that as the same character, but clearly they did not because Monarch takes place in the past. But yeah. I figured out why it was like in my brain that someone was similar. But did you guys have any favorite characters that stood out to you guys?
I don't want to say so much favorite characters, but one thing that stood out to me, what is Charles Dance doing in this movie? Like, he plays Tywin Lannister on Game of Thrones, and he seems like a pretty, like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what other movies he's been in, but it just seems kind of odd that he would choose to be in a project like this.
You
You know?
said Charles Dance?
Yeah, he plays the eco-terrorist. I forget his
Yeah.
name.
Okay, he's been in The Kingsman,
Oh, okay.
Alien 3, Pride and Prejudice, and Zombies.
Oh, really? He
Victor
was in Pride and
Frankenstein.
Prejudice and Zombies?
Yeah,
Huh.
He
so
was
he's
also
been in other
in
stuff.
The Imitation Game and Mank, just to round out his filmography a bit more.
Okay. Well, I don't know. This just doesn't seem like a movie that he would be in. I don't know. Maybe I'm alone in thinking that, but I just felt like this was the kind of an odd choice for him to want to be in. So, but yeah, so that was by the way, Udi, you had mentioned in our Kong Skull Island episode that people were theorizing that Tom Hiddleston's character was in this movie. Was it by chance Charles Dance's character that people thought was Tom Hiddleston's character?
Yes, and I so wish that they had done that because not only A would it have just been like a fun nod, but like two, it could have been like a cool like, oh, like he believed in Monarch or whatever, but then when he realized that they weren't doing enough or helping enough to contain like the kaiju, then he like went rogue and then became this guy who was like on this mission to like help. I mean, I guess that's not really his mission in the movie really. It's more of just like releasing the Titans to like save the planet, but still like I feel like there's some sort of storyline or something that you could have written and like that character would have totally worked here. And like in a way they kind of look similar a little bit. Mainly just like the light colored eyes, I feel like. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it just would have been like a fun little nod, I guess, but it is what it is. It's really not that much of a missed opportunity, I guess, but
Yeah, that could have been interesting, and I could like Charles Dance kind of does. He kind of does look like an older Tom Hiddleston, so yeah, I think it could have worked. That would have been interesting. But yeah, I really don't have anything to say about any of these characters. A lot of these characters, like I said, the human aspect is by far the worst part of this movie, and like, I don't really like any of these characters to be honest. Like, I don't like Millie Bobby Brown's character. Vera Farmiga's character is just your standard. Oh, humans are the disease. We're the issue. We're the problem. And then like Kyle Chandler, he like whispers the entire time. Like every time he talks, he's talking like this. It's like. Like come on dude speak up like and then like I don't know like there just wasn't anything that stood out with any of these characters for me, and a lot of people really were annoyed by the scientist called Rick. He has the guy with the white hair and the glasses that kept making
Zilla.
all the that kept making all the corny jokes. Like a lot of people hated that character. I didn't think he was that bad. Apparently, I'd have to double check my trivia on this, but supposedly he was inspired by Rick from Rick and Morty. I don't know how true. Yeah, I don't,
What?
Why?
supposedly, yeah. Maybe that's why he's called Rick. I don't know. I have to double check that, but I think I
Dr. Rick
remember
Sanchez.
hearing that somewhere. Yeah. So,
He
So,
is
yeah.
his name's Bradley Whitford. His
Okay.
real name.
Yeah.
He is in the movie Get Out, and that's a fantastic movie. So I
Oh,
would
yeah.
suggest watching that one.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
He's also in Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't think he was that bad, but
Which
yeah.
would
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, would Cabin in the Woods count as a kaiju movie?
I wouldn't say so. There's no giant
No.
monsters.
There's monsters, and some of them are pretty large.
But a kaiju is a giant monster, not a large monster, a giant monster.
Anyways,
Yeah, so like I mean I wasn't that annoyed, but I could understand why people would get annoyed because he does have some really corny jokes.
what's wrong with corny jokes? They're the best.
I mean, yeah, depending on the type of person you are, but like there are some
Okay,
corny
for
jokes
me
that
at
can,
least.
well, because there's some corny jokes that can work, and then there's some that just don't, like the freaking gonorrhea joke. Ugh, I like audibly groaned when that happened, like when they reveal Ghidorah's name for the first time, and then Thomas
Oh,
Middleditch
yeah.
goes, "Oh, did you say gonorrhea?" That joke is terrible, and whoever wrote that joke, you should feel terrible because that's awful. First of all, Ghidorah sounds nothing like gonorrhea, and yeah, it wasn't even funny. Like that was a terrible joke.
Disrespectful.
I think I missed that joke.
Oh, good,
I
because
think
it
I
was
missed that part.
yeah,
Because I was
'cause
like,
it's
the humor
terrible.
in this is okay. Like, there's some funny bits, but yeah, I totally missed that one. So
Yeah, but like even because like Udi had mentioned before the oh my god Zilla, like yeah that
that
joke.
was funny.
I thought that was kind of dumb.
I don't really like
I
that.
like
They used
it.
that they used that in the trailer, by the way. Like that was what they used in the trailers to try to get. Oh, we got to go see this. So
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like it worked in the trailer well enough, I guess. Like, okay, sure, but I feel like they should have cut it from the movie. It takes me out of it. I'm like,
Hey.
just can you stop?
Are you saying you wouldn't go there and like be in that situation and not make that joke? Like, I would totally make that joke.
Me personally, I don't think I would say that, but I don't know.
well, once again though, even I didn't like that joke. Like I agree with you. I think they should have cut that out of the movie.
Yeah, it's just it just feels out of place in the scene. I don't know. I feel like it would have just worked better if he had just shut up. If he had just stayed silent and just like watched it and I'd be like,
Yeah.
yes.
Dude, what you just said, I feel like it would have worked better if he just shut up. I feel like that's what a lot of people like. That's their opinion on Rick as a character.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't hate the character, but I feel like he's such an American movie character where it's like, oh, you have to have this scientist who is like super jaded and like a wacko and is like it just makes random like dirty jokes and is just sort of like a weird freak, and it's just like, okay, sure, I don't know why this character needs to exist. I don't feel like he added anything to the movie whatsoever, but yeah, I don't know.
So clearly, there's some characters we don't particularly care for. We should talk about the three main characters. Or maybe we should talk about Dr. Zirazawa. I feel like we probably all like him.
Well, yeah, I wanted to bring up the Monarch characters, like because we do have some returning characters from Godzilla 2014. We got Dr. Serizawa, we got Dr. Graham. I always kind of liked Dr. Graham. Well, I kind of like Sally Hawkins. She's a pretty good actress, but like I liked her character of Dr. Graham, and I hate the way that they handled her in this movie because they just unceremoniously kill her off. Like it just happens. Like there's no like weight to it. Like she just gets eaten by Ghidorah. They like Serizawa pulls her picture up on a computer monitor and that's it. It's like what the heck, man? Like her character
Yeah.
deserved more respect than that. And okay, another thing. So Ghidorah and Rodan both eat people in this movie. Anyone else find it kind of strange that one of Toho's stipulations for Godzilla is he can't eat people? Oh, but Ghidorah and Rodan, yeah, sure, they can eat people. Like, I don't know. I just find that kind of weird.
I thought that was a rule for all of Toho creatures that they couldn't eat people. Like, that was a no-no.
Well, apparently not for Rodan and King Ghidorah because they clearly eat people in this movie.
I feel like assuming that it's not a stipulation for everyone, it's just a stipulation for Godzilla. Maybe they did it like, oh well, they're the villains; they can eat people. But Goji, no, he's sacred.
I mean, they probably do care about Godzilla more than the other ones.
Yeah, let's be honest here. Godzilla is Toho's golden boy, so
He's the one with 37 or 38 movies.
yeah.
But yeah, I totally agree. I was actually going to bring that up eventually about Sally Hawkins' character because she was like, she was Ken Watanabe's, like Dr. Serizawa's, like second in command, or like seemingly like very close to him in 2014, and then she's here in this one and she's barely like in it, and then all of a sudden she just gets eaten and dies, and that's it. And it's just like, what? How are you going to kill Sally Hawkins like that? Come on.
Exactly, dude. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so that was disappointing. I will say there is one moment with Thomas Middleditch's character and Kyle Chandler's character that I don't think was meant to be funny necessarily. I don't know, but it was very much like an audience sort of like kind of the character saying what's on the audience's mind. Where Kyle Chandler is like, "I need to go and leave this semi-safe spot and try to rescue my daughter with no real plan," and blah blah blah. And then Thomas Middleditch is like, what are you doing? Like, where are you going? And he's like, I have to do something. Like, I already lost one child. I'm not going to lose another one. And then he's just like, yeah, I guess. Good luck. Because it's just like, it makes no sense. Like, why would you leave, dude? Like, what are you going to do by yourself against all these titans?
Yeah. Speaking of the characters, there's another moment that really just doesn't make sense. And I think it's kind of one of the examples you could use for why the human stuff is so terrible in this movie, and it's during the scene in Antarctica where they are confronting the eco-terrorists, and like Kyle Chandler goes to like save his wife and daughter, and then like it's very clear that Millie Bobby Brown wants to go with him, but then like her mother's like, Madison, come, like she just uses her like mother voice to like keep her from going, and then she like looks at Kyle Chandler with this almost like hateful look, and then like goes back to be with her mother, and then in the very next scene she's like, what's dad doing here? We can't leave him. But you just did. Like, what are you talking about? That's why I don't like her character that much, to be honest. Not very well written at all.
I think it's fair to say that like basically none of these characters are that well written in this movie, unfortunately.
Yeah. I don't mean to like change topics too quickly, but because we were talking about like Dr. Serizawa, did anyone else feel like Ken Watanabe's acting felt a little off at times?
I don't know his acting enough to notice if it was off. So
I guess, yeah, a little bit. Like, it just felt like either his heart wasn't as in it as it was in like 2014, or like he just wasn't. Yeah, he just didn't seem as like present. I feel like his best scene was his scene with Godzilla, but I mean, there wasn't really like a lot of dialogue in there or anything. And I don't know. I also maybe it was his choice. Maybe he didn't want to be in the movies anymore. So then he was like, "Hey, can you kill my character off?" I don't know. But I felt like him dying in this movie was like, really, like that soon after like one movie, like one and a half movies, he's just dead. I mean, again, like the character wasn't even really the same character as the original movie, so it was basically a new character with the same name. So there's not really any sort of precedent for this sort of thing. Like it's just kind of whatever they wanted to do. But I feel like him dying, and then also Sally Hawkins' character dying, felt a little like they were the only two characters from Monarch that I cared about, or even remotely cared about, I guess I should say, because it's not like I really cared that much about them. And then they both died here, so it's like, well, okay, now who do we have left? Kyle Chandler? Cool.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, it would have been cool if Dr. Serizawa would have just been a recurring character in every MonsterVerse film. Like like kind of like the Nick Fury, you know. So that would have been cool. And yeah, his death scene, like, I do feel it was pretty impactful though. Like I like the, you know, I think he says like goodbye old friend or something like that before he dies, which, you know, I thought was cool. And then he gets to like touch Godzilla. I want to touch Godzilla. So like
I think he
uh
said that in another video too,
oh, did I really?
or another podcast. I mean,
Oh.
you're like,
But
I want to
yeah.
touch Godzilla.
I mean, there's a giant statue in Japan. We could go.
Yeah. But yeah, I do think his death was handled a lot better than Sally Hawkins's death, at least. But I do kind of agree with Udi. I wish they wouldn't have killed him off so early. And then, I mean, maybe if Ken Watanabe didn't want to be in any more movies, like they could have tried recasting. But I don't know.
I don't know if recasting would have worked though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't know.
Yeah. I think they handled his death well, and I do really like the scene with him and Godzilla and like wherever they are. It's not the Hollow Earth. It must be like Axis Mundi or something, maybe. I don't know. That little area they're in. I do like.
No, that's not Axis Mundi.
No,
It's
Didn't
like
they say it was a
deep.
Hollow Earth?
is it the Hollow Earth?
It's see, that's the thing is that's kind of where the MonsterVerse gets messy because I think it is supposed to be the Hollow Earth, but it looks nothing like the Hollow Earth that we see in Godzilla versus Kong. And then like Axis Mundi seems like the Hollow Earth we see in Godzilla versus Kong, but then they say that it's not the Hollow Earth, so it gets really confusing. Like I don't know.
I feel like
Yeah.
there could just be different layers to it, because like the Godzilla temple looks kind of like the temple that we see in GVK, like the Kong temple. Like it does kind of look like that. But then it also kind of raises questions like, well, who made these temples? Like if it was people, like how did they get here? Like where did they go? And all this other stuff that
I
doesn't
don't
really
mean
make
to
sense.
interrupt, but I think it was people because there's a line in King of the Monsters where they say uh, something along the lines of "We need to go back to coexistence" because supposedly people did used to live with these giant monsters. There was kind of a coexistence going on.
Well, like again, like it doesn't really make sense.
Exactly.
But I mean, I again, like kaiju movie, it doesn't really matter. But I guess like the other inconsistency too with the Hollow Earth is that in GVK, it's like they have to basically like transcend like into almost like a different dimension. Like there's that whole sequence where they're like using the ships and you get like this whole rainbow effect, and then boom, they're in. But then they also, in that same movie, Godzilla literally blows a hole. Not to talk about that movie before, but just like for this one slight thing that we're talking about, he literally blows a hole through the earth from the Hollow Earth to like ground level in Hong Kong. Like, how does that work? Because like they had to pass, like they had to transcend like a dimensional barrier to enter, and then but you can just like blow a hole straight from the Hollow Earth to ground level Hong Kong. How does that make any sense? And then here it's
Exactly.
like they're underwater.
It's like the movie Journey to the Center of the Earth. There just happened to be a volcano there. Does anyone get that reference?
No.
I mean, I haven't seen Journey to the Center of the Earth in forever. So I think I
Oh.
watched that movie like once when it came out. So.
Oh, well, they go down to the center of the core of the Earth or whatever, and the way they get out of the center of the Earth is through a volcano in Italy. Maybe that's what he just making Godzilla's just making volcanoes.
Maybe. But you know, it's like Udi was saying, they're just very inconsistent on what the Hollow Earth is supposed to be. Because even in this very movie, they kind of explain that the Hollow Earth is just like a series of tunnels underneath the Earth's crust. And that's how Godzilla gets to where he goes like super fast because he's using these tunnels. But once again, Godzilla versus Kong completely rewrites what the Hollow Earth is. So it's just, there's no consistency with it.
I have a feeling the Hollow Earth is basically what like the multiverse is to like superhero stuff. It's just like a concept that is loosely explained and like slightly changed in each project that mentions it, and there's just kind of like a sort of all right, well, here's like a very, very, very light understanding of how it works, and we're never gonna fully explain how it works because then things will get messy, and we're just gonna leave it like that. So yeah.
It's like the time travel in the Marvel universe.
Time
Exactly.
travel in most things, time travel never really is
They
explained that well.
explain it in DC's Legends of Tomorrow,
Okay.
Doctor Who, even the Librarians. There's
Time travel is very easy to mess
Back
up.
to the Future.
Yeah,
They all have sound time travel mechanisms in
but
those.
that's also because they had presumably good writers. Once again, time travel is very easy to mess up, and if you don't have the right writers, it can go south very quickly.
Yeah, it can. Jumping back to Dr. Serizawa's death, I believe I was saying that like I liked the moment they had together, Dr. Serizawa and Godzilla. I think that part was done really well. And I think that that scene kind of like more in line with like the serious Godzilla movies compared to like the non-serious ones, the very silly ones. And I'm glad that they included whether or not they should have kept Dr. Zerazawa alive. I don't know, we'll see with the next one and the new one coming out. But I think that scene was handled very well. Well, obviously you guys were talking about how you didn't necessarily want him to die, but like do you think it worked for the movie or did you think it like took away specifically for this one, not necessarily the whole franchise?
No, I think this worked for the movie for sure. Like I said, I liked the way they handled his death. Like, if they were gonna kill off Dr. Serizawa, I'm glad they did it this way, as weird as that sounds. But I felt it was pretty respectful to his character.
I
Yeah,
agree.
I agree. I feel like him getting to die by helping Godzilla, which like seemingly since the last movie he very much cared about Godzilla and everything. I feel like it was the right call. Again, it just felt a little too soon, but it is what it is.
I just want to point out real quick that before, because during the scene, like Godzilla is very weak, and we'll discuss why he's weak in a later topic that we'll get to. But he's like very weak, and they want to like jolt him back to life with like a nuclear explosion, but like the radiation is so great in the area that it would kill you. So like they're trying to figure out how they can go in there without sending someone in, and like because originally they were going to shoot the nuke in there with the submarine missiles, but the submarine's weapons targeting or whatever got damaged, and conveniently they can't fix it. So
Well, yeah.
then so Dr. Serizawa goes, "I'll go," and then I think Kyle Chandler's like, "What do you mean?" And it's like, he'll go. Like, what else? What other explanation do you need? I don't know. I just thought that moment was kind of funny, is all.
I do think it's a little. I mean, again, I try not to. It doesn't really bother me that much. I like the movie just to establish that just outright, but it does seem a little ridiculous that these drones that are machines are literally melting and shutting down because of the radiation levels. But Dr. Serizawa in like a thin little suit is like a hazmat suit is totally fine just standing there having his moment with Godzilla. Like, sure. Why not?
The power of Godzilla gave him enough strength to completely ward off any long-term heat exposure and radiation exposure.
I
Yeah.
mean, no one is affected by radiation in this whole movie. Like, they never once talk about it at all. So, for him to be okay talking to Godzilla, I was like, yeah, sure. Because no one else is ever affected.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to once again go too off topic, but in the subject of radiation in the MonsterVerse is weird because once again, the older movies, their themage has always been that radiation, because you know these monsters are allegories for nuclear weapons, so the radiation is deadly. But in this movie, they make it seem like the radiation is good. Because there's literally a point in the movie where, you know, when Vera Farmiga is revealing her grand master plan, like she's saying that the radiation that the Titans leave spawns new life or something like that.
Yeah, which I was like,
Yeah, it's a
that
little
doesn't make
weird.
sense.
Because I feel like what they're going for is once again, because the MonsterVerse is doing something just completely different from like original Godzilla movies, because like yeah, original like more classic Godzilla movies, these monsters are allegories for nuclear weapons. But I think for the MonsterVerse, they want to go more of these creatures are Earth's protectors. I think that's what they want to go for with these movies.
Yeah, that definitely seems like the direction that they have gone in. And like again, I mean, kaiju movies, it doesn't really matter, but I feel like we could just be like, "Oh, well it's like it's special kaiju radiation that's like nutrient based." So it helps plants grow more and it's not like human radiation where it just ruins everything. I don't know. It doesn't make sense, and especially cuz they eat like human radiation, like human bombs and whatever.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah, it's strange. It's like plants. Are they basically plants? Like they take the or the carbon dioxide from the air and then produce oxygen? Is that the way they're going with it?
I think that could be a way to interpret it. Like they don't really explain it and they don't say it, but if we really want to try to make sense of it, I feel like that's like an easy way of like, oh, well, they just take the bad radiation and make good radiation.
I mean, maybe.
It's funny you bring up them being plants, Miranda, because the Godzilla from the Netflix anime trilogy actually is a plant, believe it or not.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. I haven't watched that one yet. Or
Uh,
that's a
the
3-part thingy, right?
yeah, and they're not very good.
We'll see. I have to watch it before I can form an opinion on it. Clearly, we don't like the same type of kaiju movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, jumping to a slightly different topic, let's talk about the fact that they used an oxygen destroyer. What do you guys think?
Did
Like,
not like it. It
no?
felt completely out of nowhere and ham-fisted. Like just there was no build up to it. It's just Godzilla's fighting King Ghidorah, then all of a sudden David Strathairn appears on the internet. Yeah, hi. So we've been developing a weapon called the Oxygen Destroyer. We're sending it. Where did this come from? It just felt super forced. I did not like the way they used the Oxygen Destroyer in this movie at all.
Agreed. And not only like did it just come out of nowhere, but it's literally like, oh, by the way, you can't do anything to stop it. It's literally on the way right now. So sorry. It's like, okay. I feel like they just needed to find a way to separate the monsters so that you could get through the rest of like Act 2 before you get to Act 3 where they fight again. And they couldn't find another way. It's like, oh, I know. We'll just like heavily damage Godzilla with the Oxygen Destroyer and then show that King Ghidorah is like crazy powerful because he's not affected at all. And it's like, sure, but maybe you could have found another way that didn't use like the seemingly very like iconic. I mean, it's only been used in the original movie, right? Or was it used in somewhere else?
No, it's only been used in the original movie, and it's been
Okay.
referenced in other movies, but yeah, only the original movie, and I guess technically this one.
Yeah, but I agree. I feel like it came out of nowhere. It just came out of nowhere and it had no build up and all of a sudden it's just there and gone. It's just like, okay, cool.
Exactly, yeah, no buildup.
Like if they actually like maybe developed it at the beginning, be like, we have this device that controls the frequencies we're working on, you know, a backup plan, like a in case of emergencies like device. Like if they mentioned it at the beginning and it like didn't come out of nowhere, do you think that would have worked better?
Oh yeah, like if it would have been at the beginning of the movie, like I don't know, like maybe Kyle Chandler's meeting with someone or whatever, and it's like, yeah, so the U.S. Army they've been working on an experimental weapon, and hey, you want to add more Easter eggs? They've been working on an experimental weapon with the help of Dr. Serizawa, and they've developed something called the Oxygen Destroyer. Now we're only going to use it as a last case resort. Like if they would have had like a scene like that, like maybe introducing it to us, then yeah, I feel like the scene would have worked out better. Granted, I don't know if I still would have liked it though, because I just don't think the Oxygen Destroyer needed to be in this movie.
You do raise a good point though, and I feel like this would have worked a lot better. I feel like instead of introducing Kyle Chandler like hunting in the movie for some weird reason, I feel like
He
they
was
could have.
photography.
Yeah, he wasn't
Oh
hunt.
yeah,
Yeah, it
you're
wasn't
right.
hunting.
I forgot about that. But either way, like instead of showing him off just like taking photographs of animals in the wild. You could have had him like ever since his son died, like this was his mission, like trying to build the oxygen destroyer, getting to a stage where it gets ready to work, and then like tied it into the story that way. Like I feel like that would have made way more sense. It would have made sense with the character, his motivations, and then like you get the whole part in the movie where he's like, I never would have thought that after what happened, like I'd be here like trying to help him out and like trying to bring him back from almost like the dead, and like he's like our savior, but like here I am, and like seeing his character growth. I feel like that would have worked way better for the story.
Really could have included or referenced things a little better throughout this movie. It's not the most detailed story, but I think one of you mentioned that it was kind of hard to follow, and I like agree with that. So like having a scene introducing the oxygen destroyer, something along those lines would have been beneficial. They like said oxygen destroyer, and I was like, wait, what? Where did this come from? What are you talking about? But I think they probably shouldn't have used it in this movie. I think it should have just been kept in the original movie, since the original movie is a response to real life events that actually happened to the Japanese people and like World War II and everyone else and all of that together. I feel like it probably should have just stayed there. Like I don't think the American movies like need to be like, hey, we have an oxygen destroyer, let's use it. I don't know, it felt a little weird to me.
Yeah, I agree. I just feel like the name Oxygen Destroyer just doesn't fit like a modern day weapon. Like in the 50s it made sense cuz Godzilla 1954, while definitely a serious movie about the horrors of nuclear weaponry, it's still kind of a 50s sci-fi movie. So like Oxygen Destroyer I feel works for that movie. It doesn't work for like a modern day movie like this. Like I highly doubt our military would develop a weapon like that, and then they would call it the Oxygen Destroyer. I feel like they would give it a more, complicated name, but that's really just a nitpick. So,
like Oxygen Destroyer 3000.
well, maybe not that over the top, but yeah.
I mean, it would kind of fit with the theme of this movie because it is kind of over the top and yet
Yeah.
not at all.
Like Kong Skull Island kind of laid down the template for the MonsterVerse becoming more over top, but Godzilla King of the Monsters like really hammered in like, okay, this is what the MonsterVerse is now, because every MonsterVerse project that's followed besides Monarch has been like this in terms of its tone and craziness.
I just got to thinking about this because in the scene, like they use the oxygen destroyer, and then like it really hurts Godzilla, but it does like nothing to King Ghidorah. Do you feel like they used King Ghidorah's alien background in an interesting way in this movie, or do you feel like it was just kind of like there as like a plot device of like, oh well, this is why he wasn't hurt because he's an alien for that seemingly doesn't need oxygen. And then also on the note of King Ghidorah, how did you guys feel about like the three-headed personality thing?
Okay. Is it confirmed that King Ghidorah is in fact an alien in this movie?
Yes, that is
Yes.
Like confirmed, like 100%?
Yes, 100% confirmed.
Okay, because I thought they were just like, oh, he's alien-like. We don't really know if he's an alien. So now that I know that aliens are present in the MonsterVerse, that has changed my opinion a little bit more on the MonsterVerse. I love a good alien. Dan, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, so to answer your question, Udi, first of all, I just want to say I like the fact that they kept Ghidorah as an alien, because going into this movie, I was really curious about how they were going to handle Ghidorah. Because yeah, in the Showa era, he's more of an alien. In the Heisei era, he's kind of more of a mutant. So it's like, all right, so I'm curious how they're going to do it for this movie. And yeah, they stuck with their guns and they kept him an alien, which I, as a fan, really appreciate that. I didn't think they were going to do that. So that was really cool. And I felt it works for this movie. I don't think that using that was an excuse to be like, oh, well, that's why the oxygen destroyer doesn't hurt him. That's why his head is able to grow back. Like, no, it works because Ghidorah, at least in his first iteration, was always a space alien to begin with. So I think it works for this movie. And I kind of like the idea of him being like a false god and like or not a false god but a false king, and that's why Godzilla and Ghidorah have this huge rivalry, because like Ghidorah doesn't belong here and Godzilla knows this. So I do like those aspects to the film. Although really quickly, I am curious as to how Ghidorah got there, because the only explanation they give are like ancient texts written by very like old civilizations saying that a dragon fell from the sky. So interesting.
How did you feel about like the three personality thing?
I like it. It gave us the meme Kevin. Kevin is the inside joke in the Godzilla community. I think it's like the third head.
Is it like the dumb one?
Yeah, the one that's to the most to the right. Like he's been nicknamed Kevin because yeah, everyone it's funny because during the Antarctica scene, which by the way is probably my favorite scene in the movies, when Godzilla surfaces in Antarctica. I love that scene. And when Godzilla surfaces and like Ghidorah is trying to like size him up, if you look at his heads, like you see Kevin just staring at the middle head with his face like, are we really about to do this right now? You know, so I do like the personalities. I think that works, and it helps differentiate this Ghidorah from like other adaptations of him.
Helps give him personality. Eh?
Yeah.
Eh?
Yeah, sure.
What about you, Miranda?
Well, the fact that he's actually an alien, that's cool. I like that. He was an alien, Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. So I'll take it. And like for the personality thing, I couldn't really tell any difference between the three heads, like any of their personalities or anything. But I have heard of this, like there's a dorky one that's like, I think in the How It Should Have Ended episode for this movie, they like make the joke about it. So that's like where I know that reference from. But like, if I think they did a good job at like making King Ghidorah be King Ghidorah, though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure. This is more of like a hypothetical, but if they at some point they made like a movie in the MonsterVerse set in these ancient times that we keep seeing like on cave walls, like whatever, like would you guys be interested in that? Like where it's just like all the ancient civilizations and it's like the Titans like emerging for the first times ever, and like King Ghidorah getting to Earth and like all this stuff. Like I don't know how you would do that in one movie, but hypothetically speaking, do you think that's something you'd be interested in or not really?
It's interesting you bring that up, because Michael Dougherty has gone on record and said that he wants to do a prehistoric Godzilla movie, a Godzilla movie that takes place in like prehistoric times. So I think it could be interesting. It just depends, because once again, like, would these civilizations talk? Would they be able to talk yet? Would they be speaking another language? I mean, I don't know, but really it's just, could there be dialogue? Because the thing is once again, these monsters, these special effects get expensive, and we don't know like how much screen time they'd be able to devote to these CGI monsters before the budget skyrockets, you know? So I think it could be interesting. I would like to see it done. I would just hope that they're able to balance it out so that it keeps my attention, and like they're able to show the monsters good, well enough, give them enough screen time.
Yeah. I don't feel like they would have the balls to do this, but I feel like if they did something like the movie Apocalypto, where it's just like all like quote unquote, not, it doesn't have to be a real language, but like all like indigenous language, and it's just like subtitled throughout the whole thing with all the human characters. I feel like one, that would add a lot of like character in the sense of like, oh, it's cool, like it makes sense, like why would these characters be speaking English? That wouldn't make sense. So I feel like that aspect would be cool if they did that, and then it would make it feel more like it's actually like in this ancient civilization that is well before like anything to do with like humanity as we know it today. And then also, if it was like sort of set in the prehistoric times, that'd be kind of cool, because then you could get Kong fighting dinosaurs like in the original.
Oh, that would be awesome. Although I doubt it would be the Kong from Kong Skull
Oh
Island,
yeah,
because I
I
don't
guess
think
that's a good
that
point.
Kong is that old. But that'd be awesome. Yeah. Although once again, Kong would probably just step on the dinosaurs because he's pretty big.
Yeah,
Yeah,
true.
but maybe he's like small prehistoric back in the day.
Maybe,
You know?
yeah. But
I
no, that
think
would be cool though.
I think it would be interesting, but again, like it depends on how they would do it. Like when you posed the question, Udi, the first thing like images that popped in my head was like stylistic animation storytelling. Like maybe it's not a feature length thing. Maybe it's just like 30-minute shorts or something.
Yeah, that'd be
Like
cool.
like something uh, in like a made up language or a like old older language or something like that. Um with the subtitles, but like have it like stylized in like animation, and then that way they don't really have to worry about like certain things like the budget for like super expensive CGI. Like kind of like the Star Wars Visions like series where like each episode is like a mini story in the Star Wars universe, but like done in a different animation style with different people, something like that. Could be interesting. I would watch it.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. I'd be down for something like that. But like to go back to what Udi was saying before, like even if they were to make the entire movie just in an indigenous language, I mean, it wouldn't be any different from a Japanese Godzilla movie and having to read subtitles. So I'd be down
True.
for it.
Although if it was like a made up language, no one would understand.
Yeah, if
But
it's a made
I
up
mean,
language, yeah.
yeah,
if it's like Elvish or like Klingon, like people have made up languages and like they could do something like that.
I suppose. But like that's for. I mean, I don't know. Like they would be a language that would be used for probably just like one movie. So I don't know like how quite in depth they would really go with that. Because it seems like. I mean, I don't know.
Probably a
It'd be
lot of
cool.
work.
Yeah, it'd be a lot of work. It'd be cool if they did it. Like I'm not obviously like I wouldn't be opposed to that. That'd be great. Like that'd immediately give them so many bonus points if they like fully developed like a complete like unique indigenous language that kind of takes bits and pieces of like all these other old ancient languages and like made it work. Like that'd be awesome. But like I would
Mhm.
never expect that for a movie like set in the MonsterVerse or anything like that. But it would be cool though. I would, I'd totally be here for it. But again, I don't even think they would ever do that to begin with. So it is what it is. But yeah, I think like you said, I think even more realistically, if this project ever somehow did get made and it wasn't a movie, I could definitely see it being like a 2D animated like Netflix limited series or something, just as like a self-contained sort of thing. I'd watch that. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, we should make it.
We could.
You could write it, Dan can animate it, and I'll just do finishing touches and marketing. I guess maybe I don't want to do marketing. I take that back.
I don't know. I just found out the other day that Toho is not particularly kind on fan films. So
Okay. Okay, maybe we don't then.
We'll just send them a handwritten letter and be like, please, and then
Please.
they'll say yes. Dan says no. Okay, well, I understand.
oh, sorry. I wasn't.
Silence speaks volumes.
I want to talk about like the monsters in the movie. You guys
Yeah.
ready to shift topics onto that?
Let's go.
Yeah, let's talk about design.
Oh, right. So first of all, I already kind of touched on this in my early thoughts, but once again, I love the designs in this movie. They're all very faithful. Like Miranda said earlier, they just let King Ghidorah be King Ghidorah all the way down to his lightning breath. Like that's awesome, you know? Like now this is how I feel. I just can't believe how faithful these monsters were cuz you would have to expect that they were going to change some elements cuz it's Hollywood, you know? They always do that when it comes to adaptations, especially when it's like foreign properties, but they just kept everything the same, and that's awesome. You know, like Mothra, once again, Miranda, like she said, Mothra is a little different. They do change her design up a bit, but I love Mothra's design in this movie, especially like her face. They did such a great job on her face. I love how they gave her like the eyeballs on the wings. Like some butterflies use that as like a defense mechanism. I like that they gave her that design on her wings.
That's in her original design.
Yeah, it is in her original design now that you mention it. I'm thinking
Yeah,
back.
it's there in her original design.
I guess I just never really noticed it. Yeah, it feels more prominent in this design for some reason, I guess. I don't know, but yeah, I like how they kept that aspect of her design, and they gave her like a stinger, which is interesting. Like I don't think Mothra's ever had a stinger before, so like that was kind of interesting. I think we can all agree. I wish she would have been in the film for longer, but Oh well.
At least
You
she
know.
opens the film.
Yeah, at least she in her larva form though,
Well,
but
yeah, she's
still.
always in her larva form, and she
Yeah.
always unfortunately dies, and it
Yeah,
annoys
she
me.
always unfortunately dies as well. Yeah. Although I will say, while we're on the subject of Mothra, how did you guys feel about the quote unquote relationship between her and Godzilla? Because I personally thought it was just weird. Because, first of all, Mothra and Godzilla historically have never been allies. The only times they've ever been allies is in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster and like Destroy All Monsters. Those are like the only two movies I can think of where they've been like allies. And then I think a little bit in Godzilla Final Wars, but usually in most movies that they're in, they're enemies. So like I feel like when Michael Dougherty was making this movie, he was trying to do a tribute to just Godzilla movies in general. And I don't know why he chose to make Godzilla and Mothra allies as part of this tribute, because they never really have been. And then even in like Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, Godzilla didn't even want to fight with Mothra. She had to like convince him to fight with her. So I thought that
Well,
choice was a little strange.
I think they're usually the two that are like, okay, these are the two. They're literally the king and queen of monsters. So like for them to team up makes sense. Like,
And I guess, but even then, like
I
I
mean,
felt like
Mothra is more powerful than Godzilla, anyways, in my opinion. But
yet
uh,
she dies in every movie. Although
she's
although
always rebirthed though, or reborn.
well, not only that, but she is one of the few monsters to have canonically beaten Godzilla. So you know
Yeah,
what, Miranda? I'll give you that, because yeah, she did beat Godzilla. So
yeah. So she's the best.
although
But yeah,
she beat him in her larva form though. Now that I think about it.
exactly. That's even better.
Well, yeah, I mean, now that makes her even more powerful because her larva forms her weaker form. So
Yeah, but them working together, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I don't think they hate each other
no, if
throughout the
anything, the movie
franchise.
makes it out to be like they're in a romantic relationship. That's what the movie
Hey, if
makes it out
people
like
want to
they're an
ship it, they
item.
can ship it.
Like,
That's up to them.
well, I just want to say, as someone who has watched every movie multiple times, I can confirm with you that they've really only have ever been allies in like three movies. In this one, Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, and then like what was the other one?
They were
Ghidorah.
probably calling back to Ghidorah the three-headed monster, and that's why they did it in this one. Because
I mean, I guess,
there's
yeah.
not like a lot of callbacks, but it's really easy to be like, oh yeah, this is King Ghidorah. It's the three-headed monster. Like you have aliens. He's an alien. They're fighting like this and that, and they're there, so it like makes sense.
The cast of monsters in this movie is the same as in Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. You've
Yeah,
got
so
Godzilla, you got Rodan, Mothra, and Ghidorah. So
yeah, this is basically the American counterpart to Ghidorah the three-headed monster. Like they're
exactly, and that's why I'm saying like that. These are modern day Showa era films because yeah, they're basically, at least this film is basically kind of a callback. And like I said, Michael Dougherty even does like Showa era things with this movie, such as Godzilla falling over and still shooting his atomic breath. You know, that's a very Showa moment to happen in this movie.
I would say this one is probably a little bit more Showa than like the other ones we watched. Like I think in Monarch, I was like, I don't get the Showa references. Like I don't like the MonsterVerse isn't Showa to me.
Monarch wasn't very Showa, I will give you that.
But like this one, I can kind of see it a bit more. I still don't see it 100%, but I understand where you're coming from now.
Yeah, exactly. And anyway, but yeah, I was just a little weirded out by the whole like Godzilla and Mothra like relationship. And like Miranda, you had brought up like the whole like Queen of the Monsters thing. And don't get me wrong, I love Mothra. She's probably one of my favorite Godzilla kaiju. But like, when was she ever like this, Queen of the Monsters thing? Like that was something this movie brought up, because Toho, I feel like Toho has never really done that with her as a character. Not that I have a problem with that. I'm just saying it just felt kind of, I don't know, it just felt weird.
She's always tried to like defeat the evil one, so like it makes sense for her
Yeah.
to be the queen, to like Godzilla as the king.
I'll just chime in and say that it's like strange to think about if you really sit there and think about it, but like again, I just like sure, whatever.
So I'm guessing based off this conversation is that you guys aren't really into the fandom shipping, like not shipping, like type scene, are you? I mean, in general, not specifically to this. Shipping is not one of the ways you participate in fandom.
No, I am not into the shipping scene at all.
I mean, it's not really an essential thing. Like, depending on the property in the show or the movie or whatever, like, if I like characters and it makes sense or like whatever, then yeah, sure. Like in The Good Place, like I shipped Chidi and Kristen Bell's character, who I'm blanking on at the moment.
Eleanor.
I'm so sorry. Yes, thank you, Eleanor. Like I like them together. They work great, and like I totally ship that. Like stuff like that, totally. Godzilla and Mothra, like I'm not really trying. I'm not in the midst of these giant kaiju sequences. I'm not like, oh man, I think Mothra and Goji, they'd be good together. I'm like, no, like that's not what I'm thinking
Why
about
did
in
you
those
say it
ones.
like that?
Because that's what we're talking about, Dan. But
Okay,
yeah, I don't
anyways,
know.
let's get out of the
I
topic
was
of
gonna say
shipping.
there's the
Um,
quote of Shay Jackson Jr. going, "That's messed up." That's how I feel right now.
so yeah, okay. So I think I don't necessarily ship them. Also kind of think it's a bit weird, but it's interesting to hear how you guys like whether or not you participate in that side of fandom space or not. Because some people love it, some people dislike it. Like it's very interesting to me to like learn this information. Um,
I just want to add that I feel like in regards to a lot of other fandoms, I feel like at the end of the day, like for me at least, like obviously not to take away from anyone else's experience, like obviously these are all hypotheticals or theoreticals or just not concrete things. So like it's just people having fun. And you know, if they just want to have fun, you know, as long as it's not hurting anyone, go have fun. But I feel like I don't care enough to like overly like obsess about it, where like I know in other universes and stuff like that, people like they really ship a couple and when it doesn't work out they're like mad and like, why don't they put them together, they belong together, blah blah blah. And it's just like I really don't like, if these characters that I like end up together, cool. If not, it's like I'm watching the story that they're telling. I'm not here to be the person writing the story because I'm not the person writing the story, whatever. So that I just feel like that's kind of where I sit with it. Like if I like the characters and it makes sense within like the world or the story, whatever, like I might have a thought to myself like, oh, they're kind of cute together.
Participating in fandom, there's a variety of ways to do it, and some things are really cool for some people, and sometimes things are weird for other people, and that's totally okay. As long as you're not hurting anyone or committing crimes, how you participate in a fandom would be fine. But let's go back to actually talking about the designs. So, Dan, you mentioned Mothra and you really like the design. I think the design for the movie is fantastic. I think what they did was really good with Mothra. She doesn't feel like Mothra to me. Like, I feel like she needs to be more fluffier, and they made her more of a butterfly than a moth, and moths are really fluffy and like more cute than like butterflies. They're kind of scary. Like, if you look them up close, like,
Yeah, I can attest to that because I have a sister who's deathly afraid of moths. So
yeah. So, like I think the design is good for this movie, but in terms of like my preference of how Mothra looks, I prefer like the Toho style.
oh, I can understand that, yeah. But you know, the thing I really like about this Mothra design, and I'm not trying to throw shade at the Toho like suit because it's a suit, you can't really give it facial expressions, but like they gave this Mothra
I thought
like,
it was a puppet.
all right, it's a puppet, yeah, well, that's what I meant. But anyway, they gave this Mothra like facial expressions like after well, she doesn't kill Rodan, but after she defeats Rodan, like she has like, you see her eyes like contort to like give her expressions. Like I thought that was the coolest part about her design personally.
Yeah, they actually get to like go in and like give these creatures like emotions and stuff with the
Yeah,
CGI, which is very different from like the Toho ones, obviously, because they're well, some of the newer ones use CGI, but like the really old ones don't because it didn't exist yet. But I do like the fact that they can like add character into these creatures now, and that's where like King Ghidorah with his like dorky face, Kevin, as I think you mentioned,
Yeah.
the fandom calls him. Like, they could do that now, which is really cool.
Yeah, exactly. Udi, did you share your thoughts on Mothra's design?
I did not, but I like Mothra's design. I have become a Mothra fan through watching all these kaiju movies. I hate that she dies in every single freaking movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I also, and maybe it's just like the ones that we watched so far, I also wish that she got more time as like a full grown, like full health Mothra. Like I know some people really like
Larva
uh
forms.
her larva form, and like it's cool, but like I want to see her be like full strength, full health, like full size grown Mothra, and just be able to live through a movie for once and just be cool. Like she is cool,
I would love to see that.
but just like get to like do that, because I just feel like every time it's like the same thing. I'm like, I just want more of her, but they're not giving it. So it's frustrating.
You guys should watch the 1961 Mothra film. It's actually a really good kaiju movie.
It's on the list.
I almost bought it a long time ago. Well, like I don't know, like 5-6 years ago on a whim, because it was on sale at Best Buy for like a steelbook, and I was like, "Ooh, that looks kind of cool," but I did not, unfortunately. But yeah,
I think that's the steelbook I just got.
hey, nice.
Hey, that's
Is it
really
like
cool.
white and
Mothra.
red?
Yeah, it's like white and red, and
Yeah.
I got it from the Godzilla shop, so
Oh,
it's
nice.
probably the original.
Yeah,
Like, I'm pretty sure it is.
nice. That's cool.
Yeah. And like, we can cover it on this podcast.
Yeah, we should. But yeah, I like her design here. I even like her larva design. I like how expressive her face is, like especially when she stabs Rodan. I feel like her face is like, "Ha ha, I bested you." I don't
Exactly.
know.
I don't mean to interrupt, but once again, I think that's the coolest part of her design for me.
Yeah. I definitely agree with like Miranda's points of like she should have been a bit more fluffy or a bit more moth-like. But I do feel like they were kind of going for like an amalgamation of kind of like a bee and a moth, I guess,
Mhm.
because like she has the stinger, and then also she's like a bit more slim, but also like still kind of fluffy and still kind of has her colors. I do feel like she should have been a bit more colorful. Like she has a lot of
Mhm.
color, but like it's a bit desaturated, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I do like Dan mentioned before, like the sort of like glowing effects that she has. And yeah, I like her overall. I think this is a cool interpretation.
She's very cool.
Yes.
One last thing to add about Mothra, the scene where she hatches behind the waterfall and we get the lovely rendition of her theme from the Toho movies. That's the scene where Houston Brooks is in. I said I would point him out for you guys. He's the guy in the
Okay.
glasses, in the bald guy with the glasses that's in that
Huh.
scene. That's Houston Brooks from Kong Skull Island.
Okay. That was a good scene.
I'll have to check for that. Yeah, it was a good scene. Very good scene. I feel like we should talk about this for each of them. Did we talk about? I mean, I don't know if there's a lot to say, but did we talk about how we feel about her like sound design?
I like her sound design. It's very. This is a kind of a big topic for me in this movie. The sound design is interesting because, first of all, there are certain points where they use the classic Godzilla roar instead of the 2014 roar for Godzilla in this movie, and it just sounds weird. It sounds weird to hear that roar come out of legendary Godzilla instead of it coming out of like Toho Godzilla. So I don't know how you guys felt about it, but I thought it was kind of weird. So, but you know, I'm sure that was done by Michael Dougherty since he's a fan. But yeah, that I felt that was kind of weird. Mothra's sound design was great. Her, I guess, cry sounded very close to the original. In fact, I think at some points it was just the original like Toho sound effect. So that was done very well. And then I do like what they did with Ghidorah because I was curious as to how they were going to recreate Ghidorah's little beady beady bee, sound from the Showa era, and they found a way to do it. So like that was cool. And we haven't talked about Rodan's design yet, and I'm sure we'll get there after this, but I guess I'm so disappointed what they did with Rodan with his roar, because Rodan had one of the coolest roars in the entire Godzilla franchise, and they completely butchered it for this movie for some reason. They gave him a completely different sounding roar, and I have no idea why. I'm not a fan.
I think the sound design is good, I guess. I truthfully can't remember what any of them sound like at this moment in time, but I didn't notice anything too weird or abnormal throughout the movie. I don't know. I think the sounds they did pick probably worked well for the monsters. And I'm not that familiar with like how Rodan actually sounds, or like King Ghidorah for that matter too. Like I don't know how he sounds. Like the only one I can very specifically tell is like Godzilla. I think maybe there was one time when they did use the old roar, like the Toho one, and I was like, huh, that's kind of weird. But like other than that, like I didn't really pick up on anything too weird about any of it.
Yeah, that's fair. I liked Mothra's sound. I mean, I liked all the sound design, I would say. I do agree that Rodan's sound design is a little disappointing in comparison to his original, but I like this version. I would probably say I prefer the old version, but I still think that this is like an interesting version, I guess. Uh, I liked that they were able to work in, as Dan said before, King Ghidorah's sort of beady sound. I really loved whenever King Ghidorah did that in the movie. It was very cool. The different roars for or screonks, depending on who you
Yeah,
want to
Scream.
ask,
Yeah, Skryonk.
of Godzilla throughout was it was cool that they used it was cool that they used the old Skryonk, and then it was cool that they like used his musical cue too. Like that was cool. Again, like you've been saying throughout the podcast, and like Michael Dougherty very much was just kind of paying tribute to like all these different aspects of kaiju films and Godzilla and Toho films that like he loves and blah blah blah, and it's very cool. And as like someone from like thinking back to the first time I like kind of watched this, I remember like it didn't really. I felt like the music felt off to me. I was like, oh, this doesn't really feel like it fits the movie. But obviously, again, like rewatching it, like having watched all of these kaiju movies that we've watched and everything, like I do feel like it was cool that they were able to work it in, and uh, especially like after having had just recently watched like Godzilla -1 and blah blah. Like it's cool to see them like pay homage in that way and like using his like musical cue, like musical theme throughout the movie, and then also like seeing them use his original Skryonk. It is a little odd because again, like they do have like the MonsterVerse Skryonk, so it does feel a little odd, but I didn't mind. I still think it was an interesting addition, but
Just want to say real quick, because you brought up the music, and yeah, they do kind of bring in the original themes for the monsters, mainly just for Godzilla and Mothra, because for King Ghidorah and Rodan they come up with completely original new themes. But man, I just can't get over the part where this is why the Antarctica scene is one of my favorite scenes in the movie, because when Godzilla surfaces and then you just hear like the opening notes to the Ifukuba theme as like the camera slowly pans up to reveal his body, like, oh, so good. I love that scene so freaking much.
agreed. It's a very good, like probably one of the best sequences in the movie.
Yeah.
But on that note, should we talk about the visual designs of King Ghidorah and Rodan next?
Well, we already kind of talked about. Did we talk about King Ghidorah? I thought we did.
Yeah, I mean we've mentioned like it throughout the whole podcast, so
Yeah.
I don't know really if we need to expand on anything.
I guess like should we just do like a yay nay just to quickly like go over King Ghidorah officially in the segment, like
Oh, 100% yay on
Yeah,
King Ghidorah's
yay.
design.
Yay.
Yeah, 100% yay on his design.
Yeah,
They
I'm
did
not-
great.
It's
unanimous
good.
yay.
Yeah, they did great on Ghidorah's design. Like that's what I'm saying. I'm just so impressed with how well Hollywood was able to recreate the Toho designs. Like, you guys have your small little issues with Mothra's design, which is fine, but still, like the fact that they did this good of a job on the designs,
Yeah, for sure.
amazing. And yeah, let's talk about Rodan because we haven't really talked about Rodan that much. Once again, great design for Rodan. I love what they did with him. I like how he comes out of a volcano because once again, bringing up Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, he comes out of a volcano in that movie. So I really like, and even at the end of the original Rodan film from from the 50s, I think it's the late 50s. I don't remember what the exact year it was, but that movie ends with Rodan like basically going inside of a volcano or like a volcano erupts on top of him or something like that. So I did like that he comes out of the volcano. And also that's another one of my favorite scenes is the scene in is it Isla del Marta in Mexico? I think that's what it's called. And I love that scene because when Rodan comes out of the volcano, it's so cool because you got just that crowd of people in below in the streets. They're all just looking at Rodan in just like awe. And like the second he roars, like everybody starts freaking out, like, oh my God, we got to get the hell out of here. Like, I don't know. I really like that. I thought it was kind of funny. It's just like, oh, wow, look at this. Oh my God, we got to get out of here. Like that's funny. And just that scene in general was really cool because we see it all the time in the old Toho movies. Whenever Rodan flies, like he creates winds that are so powerful they can just level entire cities, and I loved how they showed that in this movie. That was really cool. I like Rodan's theme. I don't know how you guys felt about Rodan's theme, or if you even remember what it sounds like, but I'm a big fan of it. I think it's the right amount of like it makes you feel just the right amount of like sense of danger or whatever. I don't know how to explain it that well, but like you listen to it and it's like, oh man, like I'm in danger right now, So like I like how they did his theme, and yeah, I think his design is great. I also like, and at some points where he has like kind of like his tail is like just full of like embers from like coming out of the volcano, like that's a cool aspect to his design that I also really like.
He's a very fiery pterodactyl. But otherwise, I thought he looked good. Obviously, it's a lot more detailed and like slightly different design from the Toho ones, but like I was like, oh, that's Rodan. I know that's Rodan, so if you can easily recognize the character, then that's usually a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. I just to quickly give my thoughts. Yeah, I think like Dan said, they did a really great job of kind of recreating these monsters for a modern era and for Hollywood. And yeah, I don't think there's a single design that I didn't like here. I think all of them were able to pay tribute to the original designs, but also tweak them in interesting new ways. And yeah, just kind of fill in the blanks of like, okay, well, if they made these suits but like living creatures, like how would they, like what would the texture of like these areas be, like blah 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 blah. Like I don't know, I think that they did a really good job, and I liked all the design. So that's pretty much all I have to say.
So we can all agree that we liked the design of the creatures, titans, kaijus in this movie.
100%. Yep.
It's always good.
Yeah.
One interesting thing I'd like to point out is they actually changed the design of Godzilla's spines to look closer to how they would more traditionally look, and I like it. I think it's a good change. I never really liked his spike design from 2014 anyway.
Truthfully, I did not notice a difference, but I'll take your word for it.
That's fair.
We already kind of talked about this a little bit. I don't know if we want to go more in depth, but like, how does this compare to Ghidorah, the three-headed monsters? Like, do you prefer this one over that one? Like, is there an interesting difference between like a modern day sci-fi American movie compared to a 60s Japanese sci-fi movie?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, like, when comparing this to Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, now, if I had to choose between watching this or watching Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, I would probably choose this mainly because, like, I just think the monster battles were done better. Now, granted,
Mhm.
Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, is guys in suits, like, pretty much just bumping into each other. So I'm not trying to knock the way that those battles were done. They were done well enough for the time, but I just feel like the battles in this movie, I just like them a bit more. And like I said, Godzilla's entrance is probably in Antarctica is probably one of my favorite entrances Godzilla's ever had, mainly because the music just works so well with that scene. So, yeah, I do like this movie a little more, although there are aspects to Ghidorah the three-headed monster that I like. Mainly the way Godzilla's handled, because we've already talked about it before, but Michael Dougherty pretty much made Godzilla a hero in this movie. Because in Godzilla 2014, Gareth Edwards tried to make him kind of an anti-hero, but in this movie, Michael Dougherty's just straight up made him a hero. And you all know my thoughts on Godzilla as a hero. I never have liked the concept of Godzilla being a hero, so I'm not that big of a fan of the way he's done in this movie. I like him more in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster because he's actually a little antagonistic in that movie. So I like the way Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster handled Godzilla more, but in the grand scheme of things, I like the way this movie handled the other monsters more, because I feel like this movie handled Mothra, King Ghidorah, and Rodan much better than Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. But that's just how I feel.
Personally, I enjoy like Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster just a little bit more, just because it's got that little bit of cheese in it, and like aliens and assassination and like 60s music, like James Bond score, and I'm like, yes, that says 60s sci-fi like all over it, and that's like something
Yeah.
I really enjoy.
I just want to cut in real quick. I'll give you that, Miranda. Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster actually had a better story than Godzilla
Oh
King of the
wow.
Monsters. So I'll give
Okay.
you that. Well, I'm not trying to say that Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster like had an amazing story by any stretch of the imagination. It's just per the norm for any Godzilla movie. But I personally felt more invested in its story than I did in King of the Monsters story, because King of the Monsters is just, these generic human characters running around, stuff doesn't make sense. At least with Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, there was an assassination side plot. Like, that's interesting, so
Yeah, because it's like the princess or queen or whatever, this lady gets like mind controlled by King Ghidorah, or am I thinking of a different one?
no, she gets mind controlled by aliens from Venus or Mars if you're watching the American dub.
Yeah, who released King Ghidorah, right?
I think
Or something like that.
so. I don't
It,
remember actually.
you
I
know,
actually
it
don't
doesn't
remember.
matter.
Yeah.
If the listeners are curious on what we thought, you could go back to that episode. It's one of our first episodes, so we apologize for the not so great like podcasting, but go check it out if you haven't watched or listened to it. But anyways, Udi, do you have any thoughts or comparisons that you thought were interesting or anything?
Well, I've only seen Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster the one time for like the podcast, and I've
Mm-hmm.
watched this like 3 times, technically 4 times. So it is a little unfair because I don't remember a ton about Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, kind of like how Dan said, not to take away from that movie, because I do remember liking that movie, especially in comparison to like a few of the other ones that we watched in the earlier episodes that we did.
Yeah.
And I do really just like Ghidorah. I think Ghidorah is cool. But if I had to choose between watching that or this on a given day, I would 110% pick King of the Monsters. Not to take away from Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. I think, like Dan said, it perfectly. For being, from a product of its time and everything, I think it's as good as it could be given all of that. But I just feel like I'd rather watch this. However, that being said, I agree with Dan. I feel like, at least, even if it was stupid and kind of frustrating points from what I remember, or at least to me, not for everyone, but just like for me, I do kind of agree that the story was probably better. Like the human plot was better in that one than here, because again, like just like this whole. We kind of talked about it already, but just like all these characters and the story and everything, just like, I don't know. It's there just to get us from place to place, really. But I don't really care about that. I just care about the kaiju stuff. So it
Dude,
is
that
what it
is
is.
exactly the point of the human. You hit the nail right on the head, Udi. The humans are here literally just to get us to the next scene.
Yeah.
It helps when it's either interesting, good, or weird. When it's bland, it's kind of annoying.
I guess I don't know. Like, You really, really specifically just like aliens in like weird 60s
Yeah.
choices.
I mean,
I
I
don't
like
like.
Doctor Who, so like or
Yeah,
DC's Legends of Tomorrow. So like I'm gonna prefer like that type of sci-fi over like other types of sci-fi.
yeah. So like that for me, like that doesn't really add much to me. Like I don't know. It depends on how it's done and depends on the individual project, but like
Yeah,
just
totally.
inherently, it doesn't really matter a lot to me specifically. But
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like you said, just a stylistic thing. And so yeah,
Yeah. I just thought that would be an interesting question to pose because like um basically we're almost done with the monsterverse and we did half of the Showa, so we're about to get into more of the Showa, and then I feel like as we continue going, we're going to see some more overlaps. So maybe this one and Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, will overlap with one in like the Heisei or like the Reiwa era or the Millennia era. And it's just an interesting like thought to have because each era of Godzilla and movies in general are so different compared to the other ones. Like if you look at the original James Bond to like the Daniel Craig ones, like there's a big time difference in that. And it's just interesting to compare them. And I think when we get to like maybe another more serious Godzilla, maybe we could like compare that with the original and Godzilla minus one and like the standalone like Godzilla movies because there's like 5 of them. Maybe we could do like a whole special where we just like sit down and like compare and contrast them if you guys want. I think that might be interesting.
I mean, I'm always down for talking Godzilla. So one thing that I want to pick your guys' brain about. So when this movie came out, it did not do well. It failed both critically and financially. And I thought at the time that this was the end of the MonsterVerse. I was like, "Oh, we're not getting any more movies after this." Like we still got Godzilla versus Kong cuz they had already greenlit that movie. So like that's why we still got that, but I was like after Godzilla versus Kong, this is probably it. And thankfully that hasn't been the case. I mean, for depending on who you are. I mean, if you don't like these movies, then that's an unfortunate thing that happened. But but we're still getting these movies. So why is it that you guys think this movie failed? Because like this has been the only movie in the MonsterVerse. I mean, we'll have to see how Godzilla X Kong does, but this has been the only movie in the MonsterVerse to bomb so far. And why do you guys think that is?
me personally, I think a big factor was when it released. I think its release window was the stupidest possible time to release this movie in
And what
2019.
released?
It released in like late spring of 2019,
Hmm.
which I
That's
believe
Marvel time.
yeah, it released between Shazam and Endgame, I'm pretty sure. Or
Okay.
no, I think it released after Endgame, but like a month after, something like that. Regardless of anything, like it should have steered completely clear of like one of the world's biggest movie releases ever. I feel like deciding to release it at that time was stupid and nonsensical and made zero sense. And I remember at the time even thinking like, "Oh no, like I'm scared. I hope it does well." Blah 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 blah. And then no, it did not do well. Um, that being said, it is kind of weird because maybe like Godzilla versus Kong again, like I'm in the same boat with Dan where like I thought that like those two movies, like King of the Monsters and then Godzilla vs. Kong, like I thought it was just gonna be 1, 2 and then done. Like I thought that was gonna be that was gonna be it for the MonsterVerse, and then it was just gonna be Toho movies from then on and blah 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 blah. But it didn't end up being the case, thankfully. Again, like Dan said, depending you ask, like some people don't really like these movies, and that is what it is. But I'm just happy that it's like the best of both worlds. It's like you get all the crazy fantastical stuff. And sure, it may not be in the way that some people like, and that, I understand, but I still feel like this way everyone can be happy. Like you get the crazy over the top, ridiculous, campy, silly, whatever kaiju Godzilla movies, but then also you get more actual genuine like serious or not even necessarily serious, but just like genuine attempts to make good movies but with Godzilla or kaiju in the Toho films. And so that way like I said, everyone can theoretically be happy and it's the best of both worlds. And it kind of rounds out all of like the Godzilla content. But yeah, so it I feel like the biggest factor is the release window, and then I guess maybe also too just that it took so long for the movie to come out in comparison to its technical like predecessor. Like yeah, sure, technically it was kind of a sequel to Kong Skull Island because it's the same franchise, I guess, technically overall franchise like Monsterverse universe. But otherwise technically like its predecessor released 5 years prior. Like that's like a pretty solid gap between sequels. And so I just feel like if it had released within 2 to 3 years of 2014, I feel like it could have done a bit better because it would have been fresher in people's minds and whatever. But I feel like, again, just releasing it when they did was a bad idea. And then it just kind of got lost. I mean, 2019 was an insane year for film. I think it's like, I think it's the highest grossing box office of all time. I think I could be wrong.
And
Maybe
half
not
that's
adjusting for
probably
inflation.
Endgame.
Well, yeah, but I mean, just like in general, like, that was like a crazy year for film and like the movie going experience and everything. And then, of course, they all came crashing down with 2020. But yeah, so just I feel like it was a weird time, bad release date. And then, yeah, I mean, maybe we'll talk about this more in the next episode, but the fact that it had kind of a resurgence with Godzilla versus Kong is weird, especially after like, and again, like I think we talked about this before in the previous episode or in the first episode, but maybe it was just the fact that we hadn't really had really big bombastic popcorn movies after like the pandemic started, and so like getting that for the first time in like a year like made it special and made people just want to go to the theater and just watch this dumb big crazy movie. And that maybe that's why it did so well, considering it's also like playing it was available at home day and date. I don't know, but it's very interesting, like Dan said, that like this is how this performed at the box office when it came out. But what about you, Miranda? What do you think?
I mean, I didn't know it bombed, so I also didn't know when it came out. I mean, other than 2019, like I didn't know the exact like weekend it came out. Um, so it could be a variety of things. It's probably because Endgame was in the theaters at that time, and like everyone was obsessed with it, and was like, "Oh, I gotta go see it like 10 times." So, I mean, like, as much as you would like to think that someone would go see a different movie, people are just sitting there seeing the same movie. Um, so that's probably one of the reasons it like bombed. I don't know. I'm not like a movie marketing person. I don't know much about what goes on with that stuff other than like it's usually double the budget of the movie. That's how much they spent on marketing. So like and I don't even remember anything about 2019 like seeing this movie or anything cuz I wasn't in on the Godzilla scene at the time. So like clearly they didn't market it to me cuz I didn't see it. So that could have been an issue too, just how they were marketing or who they were marketing to. But you know, it came out and we're covering it now. So like, hopefully, more people will go see the newest one in March or April or whatever day it is. Um, and hopefully, maybe we'll get some more like going forward for the MonsterVerse.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what you guys are saying, especially with what Udi's saying. I do think the biggest reason why this movie failed is when it came out. Because first of all, yeah, 5 years in between Godzilla 2014 and this movie, I feel was just too long. But there's a reason behind that. Now, I could have my research, well, not research, but I just remember hearing at the time. I don't know if this is true. It would be something that I would have to look into again. But at the time, I'm pretty sure Toho had a clause that Legendary and Toho could not release movies at the same time. So after Godzilla 2014 came out, what was the next movie? It was Toho's Shin Godzilla. So, from what I remember, Legendary had to wait until Shin Godzilla finished filming and released before they could begin work on the sequel to Godzilla 2014. So once again, I could be wrong. That's what I remember hearing. So I don't know if that was rumor or if that ended up being true. But supposedly that's the reason why it took so long for this movie to come out, is because Legendary had to wait for Shin Godzilla to be made and released before they could begin work on this. So yeah, I think the fact that 5 years after Godzilla 2014 this came out, all the people that would have been hyped to see it then probably didn't really care at the time, especially when you have big movies like Endgame coming out. And then I also, because like Godzilla 2014, when it came out, like it didn't get like 5-star reviews or anything, but it got pretty decent reviews at least. Godzilla King of the Monsters got pretty negative reviews, and I feel like the negative reviews probably also deterred some people from choosing to go see it that weekend as well, because when bad word of mouth spreads, that can really have an effect on a movie's success. So, and I'm not going to be one of those people. It's like, oh, the critics, how dare they ruin this movie? No, I mean, this movie isn't good. Honestly, like I like this movie. I think it's one of the best movies in the MonsterVerse, and even I don't think it's that great of a movie. It's just, it satisfies me as a Godzilla fan, so that's why I like it. But yeah, I do think those are the biggest factors into why this movie didn't do that well. Although it's just really weird though, because why? This is what we're discussing, but I just find it weird that it's the only movie in the MonsterVerse to fail, because you would think the other movies, because like they're not any better than King of the Monsters is. So like, why was King of the Monsters the only one that failed? And once again, like we were saying, it just probably has to do with when it was released.
So just for context, I did look it up. So obviously, Avengers Endgame came out in April, like the very end of April. I think it was originally supposed to come out the first week of May, and then they bumped it up so that it was like a global launch, I think. Because they were, at the time, they were doing like 1 week early releases in the UK and other maybe parts of the world, and then like a week later in the US, I think. But then like for Endgame and maybe Infinity War, I don't remember, they like made it at the same time so that way like the spoilers would be kept to a minimum for people who like wanted to go see it the second they could. Anyway, so that came out April 26th. Then I guess I should say this first. King of the Monsters came out May 31st of 2019. So Endgame came out April 26th, which was 1 month ahead of time. But for those that know, Endgame was like the top box office movie for like, I want to say like 3 to like 5 months or something. I don't know, because it was in theaters for its original run, and then it just stayed in theaters, and then they did like the extended quote unquote edition where they just had like bonus features at the end of the movie, and then that played for like another month or 2 or 3. I don't even know.
I just want to cut in. Let's be honest. The only reason why they had that was so they could beat Avatar as the highest grossing movie of
Yeah,
all
I guess
time.
that's fair. But I mean, like, I mean, the fact that it still kept doing that much money means that people still just wanted to keep going to see it. Whether or not they were doing it to help beat Avatar, who knows? I mean, fan bases are are devoted, I guess we could say. But anyway, so that came out April 26th and kept pushing the whole time. Aladdin, which was a big movie for Disney, came out May 24th, so like a week before. John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum, which I would say that this is really when like John Wick really became much more like mainstream. Like the first John Wick was like a nice success. And then John Wick 2 came out and it gained a bit more like attention, and like people started to like watch the movies a bit more. And then by the time John Wick 3 came out, like the production values were like quite high, at least like in comparison to the others. As far as I know, I mean, visually it looks like the production values are higher. And I feel like the anticipation was like at its highest for that film, and that released May 17th, so like 2 weeks before.
So a lot of things were coming out around the same time.
Oh yes,
So
yes.
that would explain
Yeah,
a
I think
lot of
I
it.
think we can pretty much just chalk it up to unfortunate timing. And yeah, that once again, I don't know if it's true or not, but if Toho really did have a clause where them and Legendary couldn't come out with movies at the same time, that's stupid. Oh,
Yeah,
that
that could have
probably
been a
helped ruin
thing.
it as well.
They
Yeah.
could have also been riding out their contract till the last possible moment, um, before it like ended or renewed or whatever. So a variety of reasons. But I think it's about time for the lizard fact of the day.
Let's hear it. What's our lizard fact of the day for today, Miranda?
So, the lizard fact of the day is about the green anode lizard. It can be found throughout the southeastern United States. It is a introduction species, meaning that the animal species was transported from a region outside of their natural habitat and placed into their new habitat, and then they establish a population in that new region. They have established populations in Hawaii, Cuba, Guam, the Bahamas, and some islands of Japan. And they're found mostly in shaded tree branches and shrubs and tall grass. And their colors vary from green, brown, and gray. So, pretty interesting lizards. So, that's our lizard fact of the day. Let's go into ratings. Udi, what would you give this movie?
I'm gonna give Godzilla King of the Monsters a 3.5.
3.5. Okay, and Dan?
I am also going to give Godzilla King of the Monsters a 3.5.
Okay, and I'm going to give it a 3. So let me do the math real quick. So that means our Atomic Lizard's average score for Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019 is a 3.3 repeating. So we'll round that to a 3. Thank you so much for joining us and listening to our conversation about Godzilla King of the Monsters. If you're interested in hearing more, check out our previous episodes, and as always, you can find us on Instagram at Atomic Lizards Pod and on Letterboxd at Atomic_Lizard.